Hi, my name is Chris Vollmer. I'm a storage architect out of Canada.
Hi, I'm Chris Pratt, Technical Sales Leader for Canada.
And I'm Brian Sherman, Distinguished Engineer with IBM and also based in Toronto, Canada.
So I'm pleased to have both of you guys here. I nearly didn't make it because, as per usual, this week my social insurance number was compromised, my Netflix account was compromised, my Amazon, and by the way, if I fell
Amazon's a problem for you, right?
If I fell through all those phishing attacks, everything would have been compromised. But what I want to talk to you about was this whole thing about cybersecurity, cyber resiliency, because we're all being targeted. And if I think about my personal life, you know, I have locks on my front doors, I have secure passwords, I have two-stage authentication. So I use all of these different tools. And one of the things I don't think we're doing enough of is using functions within storage to protect organizations in terms of cyber resiliency.
No, I think that's a really fair point. I tend to talk to my customers a lot about how we can look at different levels of protection. And sometimes I've made the analogy of the old building in a castle. You used to have multiple lines of defense in a castle. I would look at this as similar way, multiple lines of defense as I'm using some of the embedded tools in either the software-defined family, some of the IBM storage tools to say, I'm going to make copies, I'm going to make application-aware copies, all the way down to being able to make copies and put them in air-gap vaults so that I've got ways to protect my data and then ways to also warn myself that things might be coming. Certain technologies will say, hey, I see a change in your deduplication rate, that might raise a flag, that might cause a something to look at. So all through the portfolio there's bits and pieces that I would then use to kind of start to build my strategy out in concert with what the rest of the organization and the rest of the enterprise is doing, because it can't only be kind of one place to start.
Okay, so I heard a few things then, and maybe I'll ask Brian this. Chris talked about technology built in to pick things up. Are you saying there's watchdogs now in the security portfolio? Or, can you give me some examples?
Yeah, it's certainly still a work in progress within our portfolio, within the Spectrum Protect family. And as Chris mentioned, if we see differences occur in the backup rates. So if we're normally backing up, a couple terabytes a day, and all of a sudden we jump to 10 or 20 terabytes to back up, there's a pretty good indication that something has changed. Yeah. And so it's the detection at that point at a backup level, and certainly be able to detect and raise the flag that, hey, there's something that's abnormal here.
Yeah, because there's one thing to protect yourself, it's another thing to come back from an incident, because I mean, all of us will agree it's probably impossible to protect yourself from everything because you have to know it exists. And Brian, is there anything you can think of in terms of recovery? Chris mentioned the word air gap, right? I mean, tape's not dead, right?
I know tape is very viable.
Absolutely.
And certainly tape plays a very significant role in a cyber resiliency solution. And we can talk about the different technologies. But yeah, tape is definitely part of that. And it's part of the discussion on how far do you want to take your air gap solution. Do I want a virtual air gap? Do I want a physical air gap? If we're looking at physical air gap, it gets no better than leverage tape. And whether that's tape in a library or do you take it out and stick it on a shelf somewhere, that it's pretty much impossible unless somebody comes in the data center and does something to be able to get to that tape. So yeah, tape is definitely not dead.
Yeah.
And it's the ultimate in a physical air gap solution for sure.
So what else, Chris?
Well, the other thing I'd say is from a development perspective, we're very focused or maniacal almost on what we're doing around security. As we're starting to release new product, we're starting to release new generations of some of the storage family, you're seeing a bigger and bigger focus on security in the IBM systems world and IBM storage. One of those examples is with the announcement of the Z15 and the DS8900 all flash arrays. There's kind of two implementations of security at two different levels that I talk to customers about. The first one being fiber channel endpoint security, and then the second one being the ability to have safeguarded copy. So there's kind of two different ways to go in.
Yeah. Explain safeguarded copy to me in a way that's really easy to understand.
I'm going to actually let Brian do that one because that's one of the ones he works on all the time.
That it is. So yeah, it's a capability on the DS8880 and on the 8900F to do a very granular point-in-time copy so that you can roll back. And those point-in-time copies are immutable so that nobody can get at them, nobody can touch them, nobody can do anything. So it gives you up to 500 point-in-time copies to be able to roll back your environment. So if something gets in, or it was a malicious event, or if it was an oops event, then both equally cause grief in the data and allow us to easily roll back.
So that's the key point, is the immutability of it.
So there's two parts. One just from an immutability, one from an authorization perspective as well. So separate roles and responsibilities on setting up an environment and automating the environment, as well as having dual authentication controls. So let's say you and Chris decide that, or Chris decides that I'm going to destroy the environment. And Chris can't do anything.
Which would be like him.
Yeah, well, it's fair. Yes.
But Chris can't, because he'll try to do it, but the request will come to you. And you would have to also go, I'm going to be with Chris and let something bad happen. Yeah. So it's separation of controls in terms of authentication on DS8000, dual authentication controls in the automation capabilities as well. So different aspects. So yeah, certainly from an immutability aspect and security, trying to protect against insider activities from taking place.
Which is important, right? I mean, it's a known issue that it can come from inside and outside.
Yeah, and one of the topics we talk about is Verizon did a recent paper on cyber resiliency, and it was about 35% of the attacks are from the inside.
And on that's one of the other parts of that announced with the Z15 and the DS8900 all flash, having that fiber channel endpoint security, meaning that when I connect something to the DS8000, there's kind of a handshake, for lack of a better way to describe it, where I know you're a trusted friend, so I'm okay to talk to you. So when I run the connections back and forth, they're okay, so I can't go and attach a different server or a different something to the storage array and actually get at the same LUNs, because they're looking for that handshake capability. So start to authenticate and control who's allowed to talk to what on the physical, as well as who's allowed to restore from things in that safeguarded copy method.
Wow, so if you overlay what the mainframe can do with end-to-end and pervasive encryption
exactly.
on top of this, you pretty much...
It starts to become a really interesting set of capabilities, I agree.
So that's the high end of the equation. What about, I hate to use the word down, but moving down the line to smaller boxes, different types of boxes, products, things that you can think of there?
Yeah, and that's where it comes into the overall Spectrum storage family. The ability to say, okay, I'm going to use multiple things to start to address these and start to create workflows around things like Spectrum Copy Data Manager, create workflows using something like Copy Services Manager to create copies on the Spectrum virtualized arrays, the FS9100s. How do I start to make those copies and either offload them, or how do I make certain copies and do other things with them to protect them? And then in the other parts of the family, like Spectrum Scale, for example, there's been a new white paper released around cybersecurity and Spectrum Scale and leveraging IBM Spectrum Protect. So you start to see this composable set, kind of like I talked about using multiple pieces. You start to say composable ways to address security, so I'm creating multiple layers and kind of that gate analogy where I've got one gate over another gate over another gate to start to protect against malicious effects.
So Brian, as we wrap this up, any other key points you'd like to make around using storage and cybersecurity, cyber resiliency?
Yeah, and it's a topic we get involved in a lot, and because we have different technologies within the portfolio, it's really from a business perspective, what's the most critical environment, what do you want, what type of solution do you want for your most critical stuff throughout the enterprise, but you got to have a cyber resiliency strategy in place. And so again, we have various technologies that we can help deliver solutions for, but it's, okay, what do you need to do? What do you need to protect? How do you need to protect it? What's the most critical to, I need to get the stuff back, but it may be a little bit longer getting back is okay. So the different technologies, map the technologies to the business requirements.
Okay. Anything else?
No, actually I would say one more thing. Part of that is, how do I build a bigger strategy, and how does the storage team, as part of the larger strategy in the organization? What we're sort of seeing is large organizations start to set together multiple groups. The storage and the storage team responsible for the data is one of those teams that has to be at the table to voice, here's what we can do from our capabilities, as well as take into account all the other things at the application layer, at the database layer, and at the overall endpoint layer as well. So it should be a holistic conversation across the enterprise.
Well, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, on that theme, another one of the recent red pieces that we did was on Spectrum Scale and QRadar.
Yes.
So that back to the detect theme. So what we can do with QRadar from a detection, and then with Scale from the data aspect. So it's another red piece that we just recently released on that type of solution. Again, combining the different parts of the IBM portfolio together.
Great. Well, I'm pleased to wrap this up because I have to go and provide my banking details to somebody who's offered me this incredible business opportunity from overseas.
Excellent.
And I'm in for millions of dollars. So,
Wonderful.
It's been nice working with you guys. And thanks. It's Chris Pratt, Technical Leader for Canada.
I'm Chris Vollmer, Storage Architect from Canada.
And Brian Sherman, Distinguished Engineer.